Hello and welcome back to Rocket Pod. On today's show we're joined by Dannielle Haig. Dannielle is a business psychologist and the founder of DH Consulting. I first met Dannielle after her talk on the Dark Triad, and it's really intriguing with the rise of narcissism and, politicians like Trump. Who are these people, these psychopaths? How do we spot them? Do we need them? What does it mean? So really delighted to be delving into this topic and learn about Dannielle's journey, about how she became a business psychologist and what kind of drives her. Welcome, Dannielle. Where did Dannielle come from?
Where did it all begin?
Where did it all begin, and what sparked your interest in business and entrepreneurship?
So my background. So I grew up in the Midlands in the UK. So that's where I'm from originally. Okay. I have two parents. I have my mum and dad. My dad is an Irish immigrant, and my mum is of Irish descent as well. And they built up a sporting empire, so to speak. So they built up, it was really big in martial arts. And so my father, he used to have gyms, and they had like a world leading magazine and publishing empire and all sorts of things, all to do with kickboxing, karate, martial arts. It was huge in the 70s and the 80s. Okay. So that's what my parents did. They literally came from nothing and built up this huge kind of sporting business, or businesses, I suppose. And I grew up with my three siblings and my parents, and I wanted to be a paleontologist for years. That's what I wanted to do. I was obsessed with dinosaurs and history and uncovering about the past. And then that swiftly shifted to archaeology and the ancient world and people. And that's what I studied at university, actually, was the ancient Near East. So I was just saying that I can read and write 4 dead languages, but can hardly speak half the time. Okay. So really just starting to really understand people. And that was what I really wanted to do. But weirdly enough, there weren't that many jobs for ancient Near Eastern historians when I graduated. So I was a bit at a loss. I also wanted to be a performer for a really long time. I wanted to be a musical theatre performer, and I love to sing and dance and be on stage. And I think that, interestingly, ancient history, performing or acting, and psychology all have something in common. And it's all to do with understanding other people and like uncovering the way the brain works and the way people work. And so I didn't do musical theatre, I did do classics. And then after that, I didn't know what the hell to do. And I also wasn't very confident. I completely lacked confidence. When I look back at who I used to be, this beautiful model / academic who seemingly could do anything. What I now know was, social anxiety. And I just, as I said, I couldn't work out what everyone else was doing and how life was so seemingly easy for everyone else. And yet it was hard for me to just even go and buy some milk without this insane pressure on me about how the world was judging me and all sorts of things that were going on. So anyway, various jobs happened. And then I transitioned, and I transitioned from ancient Near Eastern studies over to psychology. And suddenly it was like I found the key to the world and what was going on, and myself more than anything. So I studied, I did a master's in psychology, and I started to read about the Dark Triad. It gets complicated here.
No, I like this. I love this stuff. I love it. Good. And it's almost like you pursued the psychology piece because of yourself. You was it a quest to understand yourself? Is that how you kind of
I don't think I realized it at the time, but
unconsciously, maybe.
Yeah, I think definitely subconsciously that is exactly what I was doing. And in fact, I think anybody who wants to study the brain, psychotherapy, coaching, anything like that, I think generally there is a desire to understand yourself at some point. And that's probably an underlying premise as to why people go into the industry of understanding people. In fact, in psychotherapy, they say that there's no coincidence for our job choices. So, for example, people who want to become firefighters they have a savior complex. They need to fulfill that. So they
Mm-hmm.
put themselves in a position where they can save other people and so on and so forth. So in psychotherapy, yeah, there's a reason why we do everything that we do. But interesting. So after I did that master's, I then went and worked at 20th Century Fox. So I moved and started working in marketing and advertising. So I told you it was all very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved into
Yeah.
film.
As you do,
Yeah. So I
paleontologist,
mean,
a psychologist, a film.
I
Why
know
not?
it makes sense,
Why
right?
not?
So moved into film, and I loved the job, but I was really insecure. And I was very creative, very good at marketing, but I was so insecure. I would never have the voice to actually tell my team I've had this idea. And so I sat in this assistant job at Fox in marketing for like 4 years, 3 years or 4 years, doing nothing, not progressing, not going anywhere, but just so frustrated that I had all these ideas, but I didn't have the confidence to do anything about it. So I was like giving ideas away to my team members. I'd tell them, oh, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? And they were getting all the success. And I was just sitting there, just not doing anything. I think I was earning like 18 grand a year for 4 years, like literally doing nothing and never progressing. And I also was having a really hard time managing the relationships at work as well. Now, I used to say, these people were horrible and they were mean, but actually they weren't. It was my insecurity that was the biggest problem with managing these relationships. And I started training as a psychotherapist at the weekends whilst I was working there.
Okay.
And training to be a therapist is one of the most incredible and scariest things you can do on the planet, because you are your own case study. So for years, over the weekends, I think it was 3 or 4 years, it's like every weekend you turn up at class and you're like peeling another layer of your skin off yourself. And you're like taking away everything that you think you know and diving deeper, deeper, deeper. And you're walking around for those years like you've got no skin on. You're like super vulnerable. You're in a risky state. And then suddenly one day you wake up and it's like you're covered in a suit of armor and you are so strong because you know so much about yourself. You know why, the bad stuff, the good stuff, your strengths, your weaknesses, everything. And suddenly no one can harm you anymore, because if you know everything about yourself and you accept that and you're happy to move forward, like there's nothing anyone else can do to harm you. And it's absolutely incredible. And that was like a pivotal time in my life, was the day that I woke up with this suit of armor and everything changed. I quit my job. I went back to university to study business psychology, because at that point I knew that people shouldn't have to feel that bad at work every day. And so I wanted to start to understand people, help people be better at work, to get what they need to get out of it, fill their potential as individuals, and thereby building great things and contributing and getting all of the wonderful stuff that you get out of work. And so that's why I did that. Then I did my coaching qualifications. I set up my consultancy after finishing my master's in business psychology, which I also specialized in the Dark Triad there. And then, and that now 7 years later, I'm doing my PhD, furthering my study even more. And that's it, really. That's how I got here. Anyway, I mean, there's a lot more, I'm sure, but that's it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think during your time when you had the assistant job, presumably you observed quite a lot about what you might want? I'm just trying to think. Is there a silver lining in that stage for those folks that are stuck in that role right now?
Yeah.
It almost, that frustration, that emotion, whatever that drive almost made you go and want to study the psychology. And do you think if it was a more demanding role, let's just say that if you had a higher profile role and you were using all of your mental energy to actually be successful in that, do you think that would be harder than to take on studying the psychology piece? Because sometimes these interim, they're there for a reason. It's almost like a stepping stone, but you obviously weren't content. So the glass was certainly half full.
Well, I've always wanted more.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way. I'm not one to I've always wanted more. I'm from a really ambitious family. Everyone is pushed, encouraged, self-starter parents that came from nothing and built something brilliant. There was, they were never, my parents, particularly my father, well, my father was never like, you should be brilliant, go out and do things. But when you live surrounded by people who are
Yeah.
creative and they're building something, it kind of rubs off on you. And it,
Sure.
it never seemed normal for me to work for somebody else because I
Yeah.
never saw it growing up. My parents didn't go the corporate route. I didn't see them do 9 to 5. It was wild hours, it was creative, it was ridiculous, but it was fun and it was manic, and it was,
Hmm.
there was something really contagious about that feeling. So I always wanted more, but I just didn't know how to get it or what I
Right.
wanted. That
Yeah.
was the only thing. I think it was going through, well, when I worked at Fox, it wasn't really that it wasn't consuming, because it was incredibly mentally consuming on an
Okay.
emotional level. I
Hmm.
mean, it was every single action that you take when you have social anxiety, which I did at the time, every single thing that you do, you've pre-planned before you've done it. So like getting up to go to the loo is pre-planned. Like
Mm.
waking up in the morning, what you're
Wow.
wearing is a whole like nightmare in itself. How you're going
Mm.
to walk through the door is planned. What you're going to
Wow.
say to each person is planned. Every email I wrote was like a minefield because
Hmm.
I was so insecure. So it was incredibly exhausting. But
Hmm.
actually, it was the studying that was a respite for me,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
it was what I wanted to do. It was like my safe space, it was my
Mm.
freedom.
Yeah.
So actually, even though it's definitely tiring, and it takes commitment, I actually found that was the easiest part of my
That
life, was
energized
actually
you. It
doing
almost,
that. Yeah,
yeah, almost energized
absolutely.
you. Interesting.
100%. I mean, I've done that throughout my career. I mean, when I was training as a psychologist, my first master's, that was in Hertfordshire, but I was living in Birmingham with my parents so that I could afford to do it. So I was getting up at like 5 most mornings to drive to Hertfordshire to do 9 to 5 university, drive home again for a few hours, work till midnight on my work and research, and then get up the next day and
And do
do
it
that.
again.
And then I was
Yeah.
working at the weekends. It was relentless. I mean, I've done
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
throughout my entire career. If you
Mhm.
want something, it's amazing how much time and space you can find for it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. Actually, just that one. Yeah, that one statement you made. You can find the time. It amazes me when you hear all these rut stories from folks that say, I don't have time, or but actually, if you really want something, like you said, you can make the time, and doors open, and
Absolutely.
you just make it happen.
Yeah,
And just
100%.
it's just like folks that haven't ever been to the gym or ever exercise. It's like they look at exercise as tiring, but actually it actually energizes you, doesn't
Well,
it?
as my dad always says, who used to be a bodybuilder, he used to train. I don't know if you know Dorian Yates. He was Mr. Universe, and
Oh yeah.
so my dad was one of his trainers, and he says, you got to use energy to gain energy, and that's what the gym does. Like it gives you energy. You've got to
Mhm.
spend it to gain it. People say that about business as well. Lots of things, you've got to use energy in order to get
Yeah.
what you want back. There's a
Yeah.
cost to everything,
You got to
but
spend money to make money. I
exactly.
mean, yeah. So on the martial arts, your
Oh
parents
yeah.
being into this martial arts piece, and you just mentioned your dad was a bodybuilder and obviously a bodybuilder coach. That discipline, obviously, you observed that around the dinner table. In fact, did you have family meals growing up?
Yeah,
Was that
generally
okay?
speaking, if my dad wasn't at work, then 100% my grandma lived with us, and we would sit at home, and always my mum, my grandma, and if my dad wasn't traveling, he'd be with us. So it was a big clan, a big group of us. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But that discipline and that motivation, that drive, obviously you had that was normal to you, wasn't it? That's how you grew up.
Absolutely, 100%.
So,
My father was one of those people that he would, I mean, still to this day, just had an operation actually from, he's 80 something years old.
oh wow.
And the surgeon was just like, this is insane. Like you're up, you're walking. He's like, he works out every day. He's still got a six pack.
Really? Shit.
He's committed to his life. He's the person that would have a bar of chocolate, be like, oh, I fancy something sweet, and take one piece of it and put the rest in the cupboard, and it probably would get covered in dust before he even went back to it. Everything was about control and
Wow.
discipline,
Mm.
and consistency. And that is 100%, a lesson for life. If you want to achieve something, it will happen. But the problem is humans, we are capable of incredible things, but we're also incredibly ill-disciplined, because discipline takes effort, it takes energy, and everything is a choice. You have to say no to something else to say yes to something. So when you're talking about the gym, you have to say no to comfort. You have to say no to sitting watching TV, no to doing anything, and yes to that discomfort of going to the gym and working out and feeling uncomfortable and sweating and, pushing yourself and all of that kind of stuff. But you get fitter, you have a longer life, you have, you look better in your swimsuit, whatever it is that you want to do. So everything is a choice. You have to say yes and no to something all the time. But we are incredibly poor at disciplining ourselves.
Okay, so
think about New Year's resolutions. Only about 4% of the world's population actually completes a New Year's resolution.
Really? Is it only 4%?
Yeah, because it takes effort and planning and attention and discipline and all of those things. It's the same as anything that you want in life. You have to make a decision and make the choice of yes to that goal and no to other things. I know we talk about it all the time. It's all over social media. It's all over LinkedIn. You have to say no to seeing your friends or no to this and that. And it is true. But the thing is, if you actually make a decision, like all of those years that I was dedicating to education and understanding, I was giving up my weekends. I was giving up money. I was giving up when everyone else was, becoming a lawyer and on the corporate ladder. And I was still a student at 26. I had to give up a lot of things in order to do that. But now I live, I think, the best life because I have committed. I gave all of those years, those hours, and I made all those sacrifices so that now I, have my dream life. I have my dream job and I'm making it. And now I'm like, right, now I can do even more because I've done it once before. So now I can do it further and I can push and push and push. So even though you think at the time, and social media is a bit of a devil for this because it's constantly telling you what other people are doing and what they've already achieved and what you don't have and what you're lacking. And it's very manipulative in that way. And I didn't really have that when I was growing up. So, it didn't really impact me, but I see how it impacts younger people now. But basically, you have to make your choice, which is what do you want your life to look like? What do you want it to be? What do you want to achieve? And then it's not so hard saying no to the other stuff. It just makes perfect sense. Like I'm in the middle of writing a book right now. I'm doing my PhD. I'm running my business. I'm renovating my house. I'm planning a wedding for next year. It's a busy time. A friend of mine's come over from Australia and I really want to see them. But I'm like, well, I've got it scheduled in my diary. I've got to write my book tonight. I've got a few hours in there. And I have to weigh up, like, how much do I want to see my friend over how much do I want to achieve my goals? And that's a choice I have to make at that point. I still haven't decided which I'm going to do, but that's the point. It's a choice, right?
You've got to commit, and it's developing that mindset to know that, just like you said, your dad said, you've got to expend energy to give you energy. There is a trade-off. You have to sacrifice some things to get ahead. But actually, if you are disciplined and you have that belief that this investment, or if you know what you want, I think it takes. I mean, I'm, part of me is still trying to figure out what I want, and I'm sure a lot of people are like that. It's just kind of finding your purpose, your North Star. And actually, as you just explained, you started off in paleontology, then you moved to psychology. You've got to try different things, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
You don't have, and human beings are very adaptable, aren't they?
And everything you do is worth learning.
Yes,
as well.
Yes,
learning about people in Persia 4,000 years ago is actually still relevant to what I do now. People haven't changed that much. Learning about working at Fox and spending years of my life creating pitch decks, which was mind-numbing at the time, is brilliant now. As a business owner, I create amazing marketing tools because, well, I mean, they're not that. I mean, I think they're pretty good. I'm not going to toot my horn, but the point is, I learned from that experience. I learned how to pitch to people. I learned how to present a meeting and to get a sell. But even though it wasn't what I wanted to do directly, everything that I've done in my life has led me to this point. Whether I realized it or not at the time is different. But you get what you want out of life. It's what you choose. Every morning we wake up and we make a choice. Are you going to go for it today? Are you going to commit to your dreams? Are you going to work hard? Are you going to, make the sacrifices you need to do? Are you going to have a positive day? Are you going to find the good? Are you going to hunt the good stuff? Or are you going to choose to let the day take you over? And
Hmm.
that's your choice.
Yeah.
In fact, that it's actually that mindset came from a really toxic place. I always think with my parents. So I wrote this book with my mum recently. We haven't done anything with it. And I wanted to talk about building resilient children and how do you do that? Because that's the future of our world. And I think actually lots of things that we do in society are making children less mentally resilient. And I think we really have to actively encourage education systems and parents to actually nurture that resilience within children.
Yeah.
So we wrote this book, and it's really difficult for my mum actually, which was about what not to do as a parent based upon her actual parenting. So we put anecdotes down, and then as a psychologist, I'm like, look, this is actually the wrong thing to do. And I remember when I was little, we'd walk around the house, and my mum was always really stressed. She's running this publishing house, 4 children. And I mean, we were hectic kids as well. We had hundreds of extracurriculars, and, we had to be the best at school. So we were always working. There's always something going on. And you'd be sitting, and if you were caught watching TV or something in the living room or the snug, my mum would come in and she'd be like, why are you watching someone else live their dream? And you're just sitting there watching it happen, and you're not doing anything for your own life and your own dream.
Ooh.
I know. So I grew up with this being drilled into me,
right.
that basically you don't sit and watch someone else live their life. You go and make yours happen. From the youngest age you could imagine. So now, like, even sitting and watching a movie is shit. I could be working right now. Like, I could be doing
Still got
something.
it now. Yeah.
Huh?
You've still got that little voice in
Oh
your head.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%, 100%, which is every single day is an opportunity to get closer to what you want to do. And it's tough. It does can burn you out. It can be really exhausting, but it also, maybe that's the fire that you need to make a difference in your life.
Yeah, it's well, I have 3 teenage girls, and I'm not by any means a perfect parent, but my eldest is just ready to, move on. She's 18.
Yeah, fly the nest.
Home. Yep, and she's just got a job as a BA cabin crew.
Oh,
So anyway, but it's everyone, my parents and other people say, you can't, she's so young and she can't do it, but it's like, yes, she can. She's smart,
Yes,
she's independent. And
absolutely.
it's like, well,
I
they
love
can't
it.
afford it. They can't afford it, but you can share a room, you can rent a room for £500 a month or whatever it is, and make it work. But it's bit of but you got to let your kids go too, but
Absolutely.
and tell them they can
100%.
do it. Yeah.
And also,
Yeah.
to be honest, that's a testament to you, because in reality, like, for your child at whatever age she is, to feel like she can go out there and, be in the big wide world and take on a job and be responsible and do all of those things, that's a testament to her self-belief, her self-efficacy, her confidence. Never hamper that. Never, say to your child, that dream is too big or you're too young. Absolutely. I think that's brilliant that she's that confident, that young. I wish I had been like that.
Well, I think like any young person, the confidence comes with experience, so it's a journey. But yeah, being able to support your kids, but also push them, because they need to be pushed. We all need to be given a bit of a push sometimes. But knowing that they can do it and giving them the belief, for sure. But anyway, it's been an interesting journey. I'm interested in that. So what got you into the Dark Triad?
The Dark Triad.
But also we talked about it's a choice, and we also touched on the fact that if you set your mind to something, you can achieve pretty much what you want to. But there are extremes.
Yeah.
Because some folks, and I'm really curious to know about your motivations to learn about this, but maybe how they fit into society. So I'm just, so I want to just read just one little bit on the back of this Confession of a Psychopath. It says
that's a sociopath. That's slightly different.
Sociopath. Yes, and actually, it'd be good to probably learn the differences. Okay, so maybe this, because I was going to read this little bit here, and maybe you can explain what it means and the different types and what is the Dark Triad. And we certainly know people in the public limelight that probably are. So this is a sociopath. So it says Emmy Thomas is a high functioning non-criminal sociopath. She is charismatic and successful. You'd be charmed by her if you met her, might even be seduced by her. You would not realize that she is studying you to find your flaws. It's ruthlessly manipulative and does not feel guilt or remorse. And since it is claimed that 1 in 25 of us are sociopaths, she could be your friend or your boss. She could be you. She writes with honesty about her life spent trying to blend in with normal society, with quietly inserting herself into people's minds to wreak as much havoc as she can. She draws on the latest research to explain what makes. Okay, sorry, this is. Yeah, so it just says that, yeah, they can be business leaders, politicians, or surgeons. But you're taking it, your study. Yeah, so what attracted you to the Dark Triad? And then we can maybe touch back on that. So it's just scary to know
Well,
that.
what, that they're out
Yeah,
there.
well, and then I was actually thinking, am I, and then, I was thinking after your talk, I was like, am I a
That's what
narcissist?
everyone always
And
thinks.
it's
Their
like,
instant
maybe
response
I am one.
is that
So,
me?
yeah, yeah. And actually, that's quite good. So I
Absolutely.
went through that process myself and I was like, well, maybe because everyone has some narcissistic tendencies. And actually,
Yeah,
and we're all very, well, some of us are very ambitious and very driven.
yeah,
And, I mean, I know that I can be manipulative and I've used that to get my own way in business and in
yeah,
life. But, and I'm not proud
yeah,
of some of those things. So I have some of the skill sets, but
yeah.
anyway, I don't think I am, but who knows? So,
Well, so well, I mean, I suppose to start with, what is the dark triad? So the dark
okay.
triad is a personality that is made up of three independent but overlapping personality traits. So narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. What's interesting about those three traits is, and obviously it's a big debate, which is the nature versus nurture debate, which comes into play a lot. And I think, gosh, where to begin on such a big topic?
Mm,
Um, you find them generally in positions of power, the successful dark triads, but you get a mixture of the personalities because they're independent but overlapping. There are some similarities between them. So generally, no empathy.
mm,
The narcissist is so involved in themselves, they don't really care much about other people. That's very much, in my opinion, is more a learnt trait than
mm.
a kind of genetic trait. Whereas psychopathy is definitely it's genetic. And Machiavellianism, again, I think is more of a learnt trait. So you can imagine a cake, you've got three ingredients. So you've got eggs, flour, and sugar. If you put a different variation of those three ingredients, you get a different cake. And that's the same with the dark triad. You might have someone who is scoring highly on narcissism and low on Mac and low on psychopath and so on and so forth. There's many,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
many
yeah, yeah.
variations.
Human beings are
So some
complex.
of them, yeah, that it is complex. Most things to do with humans, it's a really difficult thing to measure. So, say for example, you have someone who is high in psychopathy, low in Machiavellianism, whatever in narcissism. That person might not be particularly successful in life. In fact, they're probably going to be more of a criminal than anything else. And when we talk about psychopathy, it's really important to realize we're talking about subclinical levels of psychopathy. So not, axe wielding murderers running around killing
Mm-hmm.
people. This is subclinical levels, which impacts probably between like 0.2 and 1% of the world's population. So it's quite
Okay.
niche. Lots of people call people psychopaths, but generally speaking, they're not. They're just
They're
someone
not.
you don't like or someone who's quite cold-hearted.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big difference between someone who is a psychopath. The Machiavelli. Now, this is based upon the term from the book The Prince, written by Niccolo Machiavelli, which is
Okay.
a Renaissance book written by Nicolai during the Italian Renaissance. And he wrote this book for politicians and world leaders. And basically, it's a book on how to manipulate people and how you can run a country successfully. And so that's what the term Machiavellianism is named after. It's people who are incredibly good at pulling strings far in advance. So they have this long-term strategic calculation. They can plan and manipulate situations years in advance.
Yep.
So when you think of a Machiavelli, think of a
Mm,
politician, think about a prime
mm,
minister, a world leader. When we see a politician or say, for example, a new prime minister, we see the end result of decades of back scratching, manipulation, favors and calling in favors and giving favors and doing all sorts of things. It is such a long term calculated position to get to prime minister. That's why so few of them can actually really get there, because, well, except for at the moment, when it seems anyone can be minister at the moment.
No.
We had 3 in about 3 months. But generally speaking, to be get to the point where you are a world leader, there is an incredible skill within that person for long-term calculations. So they are very strategic, and they are incredibly good at understanding other humans and how to control other humans. So that's where that came from. And then narcissism is really interesting. Narcissism, most people think, is when someone really loves themselves and they're full of ego and confidence. Actually, it's the opposite. A narcissist really hates themselves. So they've created a whole new persona about who they would like to be. So it's almost like you've got this, like I imagine like a bauble of glass around them, and it's all pretty and shiny, but it's really fragile. So the narcissist generally doesn't like themselves at all. So they create a facade personality, which is very fragile. And if you question it or test it, they tend to get very aggressive and angry. They also tend to have coping mechanisms with the amount of stress they put on themselves. So they tend to drink a lot, maybe consume drugs, or eat a lot, spend a lot, all of these kind of things as coping mechanisms. Because imagine a day where you are pretending to be someone else for an entire day. It's hard work. I mean, imagine an interview, but for your whole life, because you're putting on an act. It's exhausting. It's like being a full-time actor. So they're the 3 personalities that you find in the Dark Triad. If you are high in psychopathy and narcissism, and you're of a high intelligence, you'll probably find someone in finance or banking. Money is a massive motivator for that Dark Triad. However, high in Machiavellianism, psychopathy, lower in narcissism, you'll find them in politician, legal, law, any position of control and power.
Yeah.
That is their main motivator.
Okay, interesting. So I was unaware about the calculated nature of Machiavellism. So
that's the main feature.
It's very long. Okay. So my simple, or my layman understanding was more we just tread on people to get on top, and not,
No, they'll definitely do that, but very skillfully.
But skillfully. Okay. So like a velvet glove almost. You might not even know you've been slighted when you have.
Oh, absolutely. And these people tend to have like almost like a protection bubble of people around them who are their biggest fans and will support them, and they also help elevate these people to positions of power. It's really interesting if you think about those people. Like, say for example, there's someone at work, this happens a lot in corporate businesses, where someone just seems to have been propelled through their careers faster than anyone else. You don't quite get it. You've no idea how they've done it, but somehow they have just skyrocketed through levels and whatever and got to the top. That person will probably have some kind of Machiavellian tendencies. And what they'll have done is they'll have networked their way into creating this almost like support bubble of people that have carried them up to the position that they've got to. So a successful Dark Triad needs other people. They can't be too cold. They are cold and they're callous, but obviously that doesn't attract people. So they're very manipulative and very charismatic. So they charm people very well. They need other people to get to where they want to be. Plus also, what's the point of power if you don't have followers? So they need other people. So they're very charismatic. You're right. Definitely a velvet glove situation.
And they do require that trust, building that trust so they can actually get things to happen. But it might not be. Yes, it's almost like it's trust, but there's a catch. There seems to be a catch. Maybe not. I mean, like you said, they need their followers too.
But most Dark Triads, they end up crumbling eventually. So that's why I get paid by a lot of organizations. A big part of what I do is someone will call me in and say, look, we've got this C-suite member, we've got this CEO, COO, whatever, CFO, and they are troublesome. They're problematic. They will have been pre-diagnosed by someone as a Dark Triad or something. And so then I come in and I work with them because they are incredible for businesses. They are ambitious. They are great at networking. They get things done. They have followers. They have people who want to do things for them. They're well known. People trust them. They're relied upon. Think about like Bernie Madoff. People invest in them. But as soon as they get pissed off or something isn't going their way, they are likely to self-implode, and they will take a business down with them. And it happens all the time. Like big banks, all sorts of things happen where basically the dark triad within them, they don't get their own way, and they get incredibly aggressive, and they are destructive, and they will ruin everything around them purposefully.
Okay.
Before they are taken away, that it's like, right, okay, if I'm going down, you're coming down with me, and they will destroy businesses. So that's a big thing of what I do is I get asked to go into organizations and work with these individuals, basically to teach them how to like manage their nature so that they don't destroy the business around them. Because it's big business. So
do you ever go in to a business where there might be this troublesome person, but you help the CEO or deal with this person, or you can help with the
absolutely.
person, or you help with the person? I guess, would you say
I do
you
both.
work with these? Okay. So because a lot of these folks, it seems, might need help, but I mean, I know, I've only ever looked at these things in silos, but narcissists, if they're feeling really rotten inside, but they put on this facade, they're not really being authentic or genuine. So, and actually, they're going to lose. Relationships are going to be a mess. And but you could take that into the business setting and help these people provide the tools or awareness. A lot of it might be like, even you talked about peeling away the onions and learning about yourself, studying psychology. It's almost like you're shining a spotlight into these individuals, and whether it's in a professional setting. Well, I mean, I guess that's a lot of your business. It's business, isn't it? How can they function? How can they build the trust? Work on the relationships, being aware of some of their shortcomings, because we can't really fix ourselves unless we know what's wrong.
Well, 100%. So I think a couple of points there. So as a business psychologist slash therapist slash coach, when I go into an organization, this is just one thing that I do. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff that we do, but one thing, and I think that's kind of like what I am known for within that sphere, is working with people to understand themselves. I think when it comes to the narcissist, absolutely. I think because I take a very pragmatic view and also understand the science and the therapy side, so like the statistical, the neurological, but also the human-centric side as well. It means that you can really communicate people in a different way. So like teaching the narcissist about themselves and about what's going on, 100%. I do that quite a lot. So I work with lots of sales teams. So you find within sales positions, very senior ones, you'll find a lot of narcissism there, for example. And it makes perfect sense, because a perfect salesperson is like a chameleon. They can adapt to any situation that they're in. And a narcissist is a self-trained chameleon. They're trying to adapt. They want to be loved. They want people to like them desperately. That's the whole premise of everything that they do, is to present themselves in a way that other people like them, want them, admire them. And that's their whole like MO, is to be liked. So that fits so nicely with sales. So working with lots of sales teams, helping people unpick that. Because the problem with narcissism is it's generally not so bad, because I don't know whether, well, let's just put it this way. So say, for example, you've got a dark triad boss, or you've got a narcissist boss or someone, and their whole MO is for you to like them and follow them. And then they're going to do nice things, right? So
if you pay rise or
so what's the problem? Does there need to be a specific motivation for you to accept their behavior? Like, does it matter if someone's being nice to you, whether it's authentic or fake? What difference does it make? Like, it's just an interesting question. I think about it often. No, that's quite a lot of what I do when I work with these leaders, is say, look, like, well, I'm not going to give all my secrets away, but it's about teaching them to understand why being good to people is good for them. And therefore, if they're good to their people, what difference does it make whether it comes from a good golden heart or whether it comes from business motivations? I mean, businesses paying for well-being support isn't because they really care about the well-being of their staff. It's because they want them to be resilient so they can work more and better. That's all.
And retain them.
Does the motivation really matter?
Yeah, no, you're right. And actually, capitalism is really built on people thinking they want more. Because if everyone was content with a second-hand car and a little apartment or whatever it is, I mean, I don't
Hmm.
know. I mean, maybe for a lot of people that would be amazing to even have those things. I've got to be careful what I say, but it's almost like you want more and more and more, and there is a kind of a connection with the whole narcissistic behavior as well. It kind of fits well with capitalism. That was my somehow made the connection in my mind anyway. But
No, I see what you mean, 100%. I mean, narcissism is rife at the moment because of social media,
yeah,
because everyone sees these facades. Basically, Instagram or I don't know, whatever the other platforms are perfect
hmm,
demonstrations of our bauble facade. So
yep,
you can create a whole facade of a life through an Instagram page. So you don't even have to act it out. You can buy the clothes, put on a photo, send the clothes back. You don't have to even afford them. You don't have to be able to do anything. It's all fake.
hmm,
Well, it's not all fake, but it can be fake. And it's the perfect narcissistic tool. Plus, social media really, the 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 reason why social media has strength, the reason why marketeers and the reason why it exists is to make money. And people forget that. It's not some beautiful community-based tool. You're an idiot to think that. Social media has thrived because people see a way into marketing and paying people to tell you what you don't have, what you are lacking, what your life should look like. And that's why social media is so successful, is because it taps into that fear
hmm,
of you're not enough
hmm,
because you don't, go to Michelin star restaurants and you don't go to St. Lucia for holiday and you're not in Mykonos over summer and you don't look like a model and you don't have all of these things. So that's why it works.
yeah,
Social media to me is the devil as far as I'm concerned. And that is why narcissism is so rife because people feel like they're not enough. And it's
yeah.
telling people from a young age, you're not enough. You need to create a facade.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, I mentioned earlier I've got three teenage daughters, and you know, we've had some really, yeah, we've had some dark times but through the pandemic and
Yeah.
and the social media. The thing is, it is there. If you take it away, then you're almost cutting off a limb. It's the social, it's how
Yeah.
young people communicate. I think
Yeah.
actually, when you highlighted the fact that a narcissist, it's yes, it is about them, but actually, it's this facade, and they're covering up their insecurities inside, and the fact that social media is constantly bombarding people with with messages that they're not good enough, then it's just only going
Yeah.
to inflate that facade. Yeah, and actually, I mean, one thing that we say to our girls is, comparison is the thief of joy. It's so true,
Absolutely.
and it is, and it's tragic. And when a lot of these young people, they're at the prime of their lives, so they've got everything, they're beautiful, they're full of energy and vitality, and yet they're being, like you said, being told they're not enough. And actually,
Yeah.
as parents, or whether you're in a teaching, or whether you're a mentor or parent, whatever, I mean, you can get through, but it's challenging because there's a whole wave of the social media stuff that you can never compete with as far as time, and it's just
Yeah.
teaching them. One school is, people will figure it out, and maybe they'll have sick of it, and then they'll say, what, I've had enough, and just and throw it away. But actually,
Yeah.
there's a lot of really smart people,
I think also
making it
choosing how
addictive.
you use it. So a
Hmm.
tool that I use. So I mean, I hate Instagram, but I love it at the same time
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I can connect with my friends, my family, and it's closed off. And I realize, I mean, our brains don't solidify with making long-term choices till we're about 21, 22 anyway. So when our children are prior to that, making long-term strategic goals and plans is not really, it's when our brain is like most malleable in that particular way. So I mean, why we make decisions with regards to our education at that point, I'll never know, but that's another topic for another day. But so the thing with social media is, and what I do, because as I said, I love it, but I hate it, is I'll go through the people that I follow, or if a post comes up and I think, is this making me feel good or is this making me feel bad? So, like, one of my favorite things to follow is like a
mm,
3D vision of what ancient Rome would have looked like. And someone has created these insane visual models of like literally flying through ancient Rome and what all the buildings would look like. So I'm an ancient historian, so for me that is like brilliant. That excites me more than anything. So I'm, looking at something like that, yes, 100% follow. Looking at some, I don't know, insanely wealthy woman in Beverly Hills who, spends 30K on an outfit and throws it away every day. Do I need to see that? Yeah, it's pretty, but does it slowly over time make me think, bloody hell, why don't I have that in my life? Yeah, probably it does. So delete. It's not going to be a part of my life. I don't need it. So I think when we're young, we don't have that kind of, some people do, but generally speaking, we don't have that kind of understanding of the choice that you have in what you allow in and out of your life. You just think that is the world. The world is Instagram. The world is what other people are doing. When actually it's not. Like your world is what you choose it to be, what you want to see. And choosing the positive stuff that gives you joy and lights you up and really excites you, you can do that with social media. And I think if anyone is listening here today and that's your main takeaway, brilliant, because you need to choose what you feed your brain every day. And it is like food, the information that you're digesting. What do you want to feed yourself with? Do you want to feed it with poison that's telling you that you're not enough and that you're bad and you don't have these things and, all of that stuff? Or do you want to feed it with something that nurtures you and excites you? So if that is the only thing you take away, brilliant. Go and do that straight away, because I think it will change so much about your kind of your worldview, your efficacy, your place in the world, and what you see and what you nurture yourself with.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I like it. And actually, if you can be intentional about what you want for yourself, then you can everything else. Well, you can delete these other things that aren't relevant to you. It's almost like how do you kind of get into the zone?
100%. It's reaching that goal again. It's about saying yes and no. Yes, this is good for me. No, that is not good for me. Delete and gone.
Mm-hmm. So as far as the Dark Triad, are there situations where a business could really benefit from actually finding a Dark Triad? And then how do they find them?
The business doesn't find them; they find the business.
There you go. Yeah, of course.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone actively hunts out Dark Triads to work for them. I mean, as I said, you'll find them in major conglomerates, you'll find them in big banks, you'll find them in politics. I mean, I work with a lot of financial institutions and you come across a lot of interesting personalities there, but also a big insurance company, a big well-known but niche insurance company contacted me once and said, we've got a whole layer of psychopaths working for us in this whole team, and we're really worried about their destructive nature. Will you come in and do something with them? So it's not just obviously in finance. You find these personalities everywhere. But remember, it's not a huge percentage of the population. We're really, really keen to diagnose other people with their mental pathologies. It's like a weird human desire to kind of understand someone, is to be like they're a Dark Triad, when actually the person might just be, as you said, really ambitious and quite cold and quite goal oriented, or they might be neurodiverse. They might actually be autistic and not feel empathy the same way. And in fact, there's a really good book which I love, written by, who is Ali G?
What's his name?
Sacha Baron Cohen.
Yeah, there you go.
Sacha Baron Cohen's cousin is one of the world's leading autism experts. And he wrote this brilliant book called 0 Degrees of Empathy. And I've got it somewhere and I read it every so often. It's absolutely brilliant.
So would you recommend that? Because I was going to ask you, well, I know we're kind of getting close to the end, but I was going to ask you if you could recommend a book or what book has, in fact, maybe you could recommend that, but the question was going to be what book has impacted you, the most in the last 5 years, and if you could think of one, but we'll check that one out as well.
Yeah, so 0 Degrees of Empathy is definitely good reading if you're interested in psychology and that kind of that side of. Here it is, Simon Baron Cohen, 0 Degrees of Empathy, a new theory of human cruelty and kindness. It's really interesting.
Okay,
so as I said, so we often diagnose other people, but actually we don't know half of it.
No.
Someone saying someone is a psychopath because they don't show much empathy. Perhaps, they actually have a degree of autism, or you don't know what's gone on with that person. It could be a learned behavior, for example, to be very protective of themselves. So I'm very cautious of people who tell me that other people have certain pathologies, generally speaking. But when it comes to the dark triad, they can be very useful in businesses. So back to your original question, which is, they're ambitious. They work hard. They are good at gaining traction. They're some of the best people in the world. They are not best people, some of the best people in business in the world.
Genius,
are dark triads. And they propel things forward. But the problem is they also have a tendency to self-destruct. So Bernie Madoff, for example, time was running out. You can only manipulate people in the way that he did for so long. Donald Trump is a perfect example. I mean, that man, people used to go on about how stupid he was. I don't think he's stupid at all. I think he was a genius in the way that he behaved. Do I agree with everything he said? Absolutely not. But it's just fascinating standing back, removing your political views, removing everything, and just watching someone's growth and their ability to manipulate and make things happen. It's astonishing.
And not be fazed by the barrage of, and even legals, or always find a way.
Absolutely. That's somehow a really interesting point. So look at Boris Johnson. Like, most people, so this is something that you'll find as well. So male dark triads, they tend to have many, many children with different people. So that's a big thing, because they can't hold up the facade with partners for so long. And they tend to take their aggression out on their partners as well, because it's kind of like behind closed doors. Whereas to the public and to the world, they're this brilliant, confident, funny, charismatic person, but behind closed doors, it's never quite the same. Because you can't put on that shiny facade for so long. So they tend to have lots of partners. They have an inability to keep it in their pants, basically. And so, like, thinking about how many kids Boris Johnson had with different women, cheating on his wife, all of this stuff. I mean, affairs within within the cabinet, all of that kind of stuff. Most people would be mortified if that came out. You'd be thinking, what are my parents going to think? What's my family going to think? Don't care. It's like water off a duck's back.
Yeah.
Every legal case, every time that they're accused of something, they feel nothing. And this is actually interesting, because this is how I built my business, was actually talking about the dark triad, but in a what can we learn from them position, rather than how can we change them? Because I think it's always dangerous to try and change other people anyway. I think you can't change other people. We've all tried and we've all failed, I'm sure. Yep. We can't change other people. All we can do is change our response to them. That is all we can do. And that empowers you. So I always say to people who work with dark triads, like, you have to understand the way they work so that you can work with them, instead of trying to invest all your energy into changing this person that, quite frankly, knows the rules better than you and will beat you at it. So you adjust your behavior, learn how they work, and manipulate the situation for your benefit. Make it work for you. Don't try and change them. It's never going to happen. But they are shameless. They feel nothing. And I think that's the important element of the psychopaths. So psychopaths feel no fear. It's almost like their amygdala is switched off. So there's no anxiety. Imagine living in a world where you had no fear of anything. You didn't care what people thought of you. You didn't care about the repercussions of your choices. You just did what you wanted to do. You too would probably reach lofty heights, or loftier heights. It's the fear that holds us back from most things in life. And they don't feel it. So we can learn a lot from these dark triads.
That was really good. That was nicely put. Very nicely put. Very powerful. And actually, business, quite often, it's like, I mean, I'm guilty of this as charged, get too emotionally wrapped up with whether it's a startup or, it's your whole world, when actually it's only business. And, sometimes 100%. It works, sometimes it doesn't. And don't get too attached to it, because it's business.
Exactly. Imagine how many businesses you might have tried to set up, or you would have invested in, or you would have walked away from, if you hadn't attached emotion to that organization, or what that business represents to you, or what success means to you. All of these things are fear. And fear isn't the most powerful emotion on the planet. As we've just seen during lockdown, I mean, we were controlled by fear, basically. Logic goes out the window when fear is involved. It's our most primary emotion. Our brain is there to keep us alive, not to make us happy. And so it does everything within its power to look out for fear, scary situations, to keep us alive. And that's why fear is so powerful, because it's intrinsically linked into our survival mechanism, which is the primary core of our brain.
That's fascinating. So when it comes to the drive piece, because emotions, our emotions give us energy and impetus to actually do something. But when it comes to the Dark Triad,
whether it's good or bad,
do you think, yes, do you think, well, we can use our emotions to kind of create that energy to be motivated. But do you think someone in the Dark Triad or a psychopath would actually draw off the same? Would it still be emotion, or would it be just or would it just be cold? I want the money. I don't know. Is it?
I think it depends.
Still emotional bit. We're all emotional beings, right? They're still emotional.
They don't really feel very much when it comes to emotion.
Not empathy.
Like they feel nothing much.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no empathy. But also they just don't really feel much within themselves. When you were talking about a sociopath earlier, sociopath has degrees of emotion. So they tend to feel rage and they get heightened emotion, actually.
Okay.
Whereas a psychopath doesn't really feel heightened emotions.
Okay.
So it's nothing. Again, imagine, I teach all the time. I teach classes on how to control your emotions. Emotional regulation is one of the most important lessons you can learn in life. An emotion is not real. An emotion is just a neuron firing. You choose whether you act on it or not. But an emotion is completely fake. An emotion is a signal telling you about an insecurity or telling you something else that you haven't quite realized or acknowledged or verbalized. For example, resentment is an emotion that we feel. And most of the time we just sit there and just feel horrible and feel resentful towards something, when actually it's a signal saying you need to put your boundaries up. You've been taken advantage of and you need to say no to something and yes to yourself. That's all it is. And emotions aren't scary. They're just signals. But we give so much power to them. Instead of sitting and rationalizing them, we give them power and a voice, and we are led by them, when actually we should be controlling our emotions, not be controlled by them. So again, another superhuman power of the Dark Triad is the fact that they are not regulated by emotions. And when you're not regulated by emotions, you can't be controlled by someone else.
Yeah. Okay. That's a really important distinction, isn't it? But also, you know
Absolutely.
how to control other people, because they're almost being outmaneuvered because actually
they
you
are
can use
emotive.
Because they are emotional. So it's actually
how you manipulate.
Yes. Okay. Interesting. Very good. Now we're coming close to the end of our time.
Oh,
is
yes.
there? Yeah, it's been great. Time's been flying by. So, what do you know to be true that most people might disagree with you on?
I love this question.
Yeah.
I had a thing this morning before the pod, and I think that the first thing that came to my mind is probably that there's no such thing as good or bad.
Okay.
They are human-made concepts that just do not exist. Everything is just, as in just is. It's not good, it's not bad. People are not good, they're not bad. Everything just is, and that's it. I think if you attribute good and bad to things, they have more power than they need to. If you think about through history, going back again to history, think about myths and legends, religion, all movies, storybooks, everything is about good versus evil all the time. And I think that if we subscribe to the concept that good wins ultimately, I think you will just spend your life being constantly disappointed and upset. Good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people, however you want to define that. And that's just life. I think if you just accept things for what they are and choose your response to them, I think you will live a happier life. Don't attribute good and bad to anything. Just see it for what it is, and life gets very simple.
Well, that's pretty profound. That's a whole. We could spend the next hour talking about that, couldn't we? Very good. If you were to in your current where you are currently, if you were to meet someone for coffee, anyone, who would that be and why?
It's got to be Freud. 100%. My godfather, not my godfather, my shining light, 100%, without a doubt. Oh, I don't know, actually, maybe an ancient. I'm going to stick with Freud. I'm going to
Okay.
stick with Freud. You know, he was an archaeologist who was, you know, the godfather and the father of psychotherapy and understanding of humans. I mean, God, to lie on his couch and have a session, a psychotherapy session with him would just be probably unraveling.
Wow. So I had
But
no
I
idea he
love
was
him.
I had no idea he was an archaeologist. So
Absolutely. So
is there any
in
connection there
London, you
between
can
your
go to his house.
paleontology? You've started as a
This is what I
paleontologist.
mean.
It's
This
so
this
bizarre, isn't
desire
it?
to
Is that
uncover things and
yeah.
understand them, things that on the surface might look a certain way, but understanding like the human behind it, the reasoning and all of that kind of stuff. Absolutely. Archaeology, ancient history, paleontology, all of that. Absolutely. So you can go to Freud's house in North London, which is where he died actually. He spent a few years there. And his
Hmm.
couch and his office and everything are there. But also you can see a big cabinet of some of his artifacts that he collected.
Wow, I had no idea. Maybe I'll check it out, and maybe our listeners can go check it out. Good.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
well, it's great having you on, and it's been an absolute
Thank you.
pleasure. And perhaps we can follow catch up with you in 3 years, 3 to 5 years
I'd
time, and see where
love
you
that.
are. Um,
Absolutely. Hopefully, some books published. I'll be a doctor by then. All sorts of
yeah,
good things, hopefully.
excellent. Okay. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Rocket Pod. When you get a moment, we'd love it if you could jump over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a quick review. We love all your messages. It helps us get exposed to inspire and share more stories like this one and helps guide us to figure out who to interview next. The talk with Dannielle today was particularly inspiring. A couple of takeaways. To get energy, you have to expend energy. I thought that was a really interesting one from her dad. And I think with this whole social media culture where we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people and focusing on the things that we don't have, drives this desire to put this big fake facade, hey, as in the rise of narcissism. It really makes sense, but inside, a lot of these folks are insecure. And then, of course, we touched on the Dark Triad. I think what I found interesting was someone that in the Dark Triad can be a combination of any three. They're either psychopaths, Machiavellists, or narcissists. They have to have all three traits, but these can be in different quantities. And sometimes organizations need these people because they drive the revenues, but you have to watch out because quite often these folks fall down at the end. And we touched on various politicians such as Trump and Boris. Anyway, just kind of an interesting one there. So, yeah, thanks again, Dannielle. For those listeners out there that want to get in touch with Dannielle, her Instagram account is dh_coaching and her website is DannielleHaig.com. That's DANNIELLEHAIG.com. Thanks again, Dannielle, for coming on the show, and have a great rest of the week, everybody. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.